The prep room sits quiet on the mezzanine. Ansel Moritz tilts amber resin into a mold. Behind him, a gloved hand flicks the ceiling exhaust from on to off. The door pulls shut. He coughs once and keeps pouring, alone in a room he cannot leave. Patrol forced the prep room door. Moritz lay slumped beside the half-poured mold, resin already set hard in the seam. Nox stepped across the threshold in his charcoal peacoat. Leen knelt at the body. The ceiling exhaust switch rested at off. A 2-foot steel security bar lay flat against the baseboard. Nox paced the sloped concrete, turning his signet ring through 3 slow counts. The steel bar rested flush at the baseboard. Above it, a shallow watermark ringed the floor, 9 centimeters out from the wall, left by something that had melted and held weight. The floor sloped toward the loading bay. Something had propped that bar. In the morgue, Dr. Hale slid the drawer open under cold blue fluorescence. She lowered her wire-rimmed glasses a half-inch and delivered the finding without inflection. Asphyxiation from resin vapor in a sealed volume. Thermal gradient placed death between 1930 and 2030. When Nox asked how the room had been sealed, she replied that speculation was his job. Mid-morning bullpen, Nox pinned 4 portraits to the corkboard. Corin Brack, logistics coordinator, shaved head and quilted jacket. Gemma Solan, director, silver bob and cream linen. Tobias Kern, rival sculptor, navy jacket. Rena Voss, critic, auburn curls. Below them, the reception timeline. At the center, the prep room photograph, watermark ring and bar beside it. Suspect, Corin Brack, stated alibi. Wine station on the main floor from 7 to 8. Out the front entrance at 7:59. Inferred opportunity. 18-minute gap between prep room last seen and front gate sign out. Interview room 1. 1. Gemma Solan sat with folded hands, her cream linen and cashmere shawl composed. She had run the reception from 6 until 10, greeted every buyer by name, held the main floor the full evening. Both cameras carried her on timestamp. Moritz, she noted, always locked the prep room from inside while pouring. Suspect, Tobias Kern, stated alibi. Critics' dinner at the Chelsea wine room from 7:15 until 10:15, seated the whole evening. Inferred opportunity, no opportunity window if dinner attendance is confirmed. Nox at a terminal in the bullpen, Leen reading past his shoulder. The gallery's freight elevator log pulled up clean on the monitor. A single call logged at 1948 the previous night, from the loading bay, descending to ground level. No sign-in on any collected timeline matched the descent. Rena Voss took interview room 2 with a paper cup of tea, camel coat folded on the chair back. She had spent the reception window 2 blocks south at the Chelsea wine room. She had driven Tobias there at 7:15 and driven him back at 10:15. She had watched a clock behind the bar past 9. Nox returned to the prep room alone at noon. He climbed a short stepladder to the ceiling exhaust and set gloved fingers against the switch. Off. No tampering marks, no cover plate pried, no cable cut. Someone had flicked it by hand. The watermark ring still held 9 centimeters out from the baseboard. Rena remembered the critics' dinner as a warm amber basement at the Chelsea wine room. 8 guests around a narrow table, Tobias seated beside her on the banquette, refilling her glass between courses. She had watched the clock behind the bar pass 8, and then pass 9, and across the whole window Tobias had never stood from his seat. Outside the prep room door, Rukcho knelt at the exterior handle with a UV wand, navy polo, black latex gloves. Under the blue light, a cadmium red palette smudge bloomed against the steel. He lifted it into an evidence bag and logged the intake without raising his eyes. Nothing existed for Rook until it was bagged. Evidence bench, cold blue fluorescence. Rook turned a wedge-shaped fragment of cork-backed foam in gloved fingers. Recovered from the gallery loading dumpster 2 hours earlier. Consistent with gallery packing material, compression pattern matching roughly 3 kilograms of rest weight. He sealed the bag, slid it across, and turned away mid-sentence to log the next intake. Corin Brack leaned forward in the interview chair, jacket unzipped, and revised his exit time. He had said 7:50. Now he was sure it had been 7:40. Nox repeated the 3 words back, flat. The wine station. Corin's jaw tightened. His right hand closed around the chair arm. Leen wrote the correction down without lifting her eyes. Leen at her desk, phone to her ear. The Chelsea wine room maitre d' confirmed 8 dinner guests on the card. Tobias seated the whole evening. Rena's credit card closing the tab at 10:14. The paint smudge text follow-up placed the cadmium red on the handle as a shared workshop transfer from Tobias's sleeve 2 days prior. A harbor-front diner in the flats, window fogged with rain. Arden Quill sat across from Nox in his oatmeal cardigan. wire rims low on his nose. He folded his hands and waited a full beat before speaking. The room, he said, had not locked itself at the moment that mattered to the killer. It had locked itself when it was convenient. The watermark ring, the clock hand, the sloped floor. Nox knelt on the prep room floor with a steel marble. He set it flush to the baseboard and let go. It rolled a clean 4 centimeters down the drainage slope and stopped against a dust line. He measured the watermark ring with a steel tape. 5 centimeters of displacement the floor could not account for. Corin took the chair again, elbows on the table, eyes on the wall. Nox set the bagged cork fragment between them. Corin did not speak. Nox set the elevator log printout beside it, the 1948 timestamp circled in black ink. Corin's hand tightened on the chair arm. Nox did not press. He waited. Leen at her desk, a printed employment history on the blotter, one line highlighted yellow. Corin's file showed a single prior engagement 18 months earlier, logistics for a harbor redevelopment foundation gala. She slid the page across. Nox read the line once, folded the page in half, and set it beside the case file without a word. The bullpen corkboard held the sequence tight now, a photograph of the watermark ring at 9 centimeters, a floor slope diagram with the 4 centimeter marble line beside it, the cork-backed shim in its evidence bag, the freight elevator log circled at 1948, the steel security bar propped below, pinned underneath, 4 portraits, Corin, Gemma, Tobias, Rena. 3 carried green checkmarks. 1 did not. Minutes don't lie, people do. At his desk, Nox sketched the geometry on a napkin in blue pen. A freely placed ice block of the measured volume on that drainage slope leaves a ring 4 centimeters from the baseboard. The actual ring read 5 centimeters of displacement fit a cork shim of exactly that thickness sitting under the block, extending the melt window by roughly 40 minutes. The briefing room dimmed to a low deduction act blue. A timeline band slid across the lower frame, 1930 to 2030. Event markers dropped into place. The pour began. Corin entered the prep room carrying the shim. The freight elevator logged a descent at 1948. The stated front gate departure at 1959 pulsed red and crossed out. The bar dropped at 2015. The corkboard in the briefing room, fully assembled. Nox walked the line once from left to right. Pour, shim, ring, elevator, latch. Leen's eyes moved across the 4 pinned portraits. Green checks held on Gemma, Tobias, and Rena. On Corin Brack's card, Nox tacked a red question mark. A beat later, a red underline beside it. 4 suspects under bronze ring lights. Corin nearest the freight shaft. Nox walked the timeline back. Gemma held the wine station the full window, on camera throughout. Tobias sat the Chelsea dinner with Rena 1 tab. 8 guests. The palette smudge traced to a shared workshop transfer. Nox set the cork fragment beside the ring photograph. Displacement put the bar at 2015. The elevator log put Corin on the freight at 1948. Corin bolted from the lineup toward the freight shaft gate at the loading bay. Leen shouted his name. Nox moved after him, peacoat catching briefly on a sculpture plinth. The gate slid up in Corin's hand. He pivoted on the threshold, grabbed the rail, and looked down into the shaft. The freight elevator car sat 2 floors below, where Corin had called it at 1948 the night before. He stepped into the empty shaft expecting a floor that was not there. The sound was short. Nox reached the open gate 1 beat too late, hand flat against the rail, looking down. Dawn, harbor fog came in off the bay through the open loading bay doors, slow and gray. Forensics moved below at the shaft base. Nox and Leen stood at the threshold. 4 full seconds of no speech. Leen looked at the watermark ring on the prep room floor behind them, then looked at Nox. Neither spoke. Gallery entrance, early morning, the fog thinning over Old Harrow. Nox alone on the stone steps, holding the small steel marble between gloved fingers, turning it slow against the light. He turned his wristwatch face out once, then face in. He pocketed the marble. He walked south along Crone Street into the lifting gray,